In 30 seconds, you will be witness to one of the greatest online events in the history of, well, online events. Descript proudly brings to you a topic that you deeply care about and whose name is the title of this online event. I'm Don. I am not your host. I am an overdub stock voice included for free with Descript. So, now, let's meet someone who actually works here.
Hey, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. My name's Jiroudek. I'm a customer success manager and product specialist here at Descript, and I'm so excited to be talking to you about some tips, tricks, and common questions that come up when working in Descript. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Marcello, from the customer support team. Marcello talks with our customers every day, and so he has some great insights that he'll be able to share with us. Hey, Marcello.
Hey, Harmony, how's it going?
Good. So excited you're joining us today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. This should be a really great time.
Awesome. So for those of you that are like, what's Descript? What does it do? Why is it important? Descript is a collaborative audio and video editor that works like a Google Doc. And so we're going to be showing you a variety of features today, from how to organize your content, how to record it, how to transcribe it, how to edit it, and then share it, how to get it out in the world. And before we kick things off, I'd love for everyone that's joining us today, go over into the YouTube chat, introduce yourself, tell us where you're joining us from today. I'm in San Diego, California, and Marcello, I think you're in the Bay Area, right? You just relocated to Oakland?
Yep, up here in Oakland.
Awesome. Well, so everyone, please put it in the chat. Tell us where you're joining us, and we're going to start breaking it down for you. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to just walk you through our outline for today. So we're going to talk about how to collaborate with your colleagues, how to organize your material. We'll give you some tips and tricks for how to organize your material now that we have a new project sidebar. We're going to talk about how to transcribe your material, how to do some multi-track editing. There's a number of ways you can also record your content in Descript, whether it's just audio or even a screen recording. And then we'll talk about sharing, overdub, and then anything else that you might ask us in the chat. So we have an hour today, and we're excited to kick things off. So Marcella, do you mind sharing your screen and maybe just break things down for us? Like, let's take a look at what a Descript project is.
Yeah, absolutely. So here, first things off, when you open the Descript application, the first thing you're going to see is the drive view. That's what we have here before us. So from the drive view, I can see all projects that I'm related to, projects strictly created by me, projects shared by me, downloaded, and so on. We'll also see space for our workspaces. So we have a drive workspace, which is meant for a collaborative workspace for all the members across my drive. And we also have my workspace, which is a personal space for me to store private projects or projects I'm working with members outside of my drive on. So that can all be seen from the drive view. And then from here, we can dive actually into a project and see a little bit further by selecting any of the projects that would be listed here.
Fantastic. So maybe let's talk a little bit about the hierarchy of things. So you're breaking down the drive view for us here. So we have our drives, we have our folders, projects, and compositions. Do you want to maybe break that hierarchy down for us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the hierarchy for Descript, you're going to have, like you mentioned, drives, projects, compositions, folders, sequences. There's a bunch of, let's say, jargon that we might want to break down here. So with Descript, from the drive view that we're seeing here, we can see, like I said, a project, but a project can be housed in a folder. So if I, let's say, go to my drive workspace, you can see on the top right of my screen, I'll see an option for new folder. So I can create a new folder for organization purposes. And from here, the hierarchy would be that I could have, from my drive view, multiple folders. I can organize my projects in these multiple folders. I can easily move projects around with the ellipses menu on the far right of each project. There's a Move To button, and I can see every single drive, workspace, or folder that I have access to. So if I wanted to move this project into that folder, I could select that folder, click Move, and now that project's been reorganized into this folder. This helps makes things look very, very clean on your drive view, and helps a lot for collaboration or just general organization. But the highest rung would be drive view. Next down would be folders to organize. And then we have our projects. Now, once we're in a project actually houses all that media. So the drive view is just organizing our projects, but when we're in that project, that's when we're going to see more media and be handling compositions, sequences, and individual files. We also have a folder structure in the project. So if you need to organize, by episode or groupings of compositions, sequences, files, whatever it may be, we also have that same file structure in the project sidebar of the project. But continuing the hierarchy, we'll have our project, which houses, again, files, sequences, and compositions. So from the project, we have multiple compositions. On the left-hand side here, you'll see denoted by the paper, like the page icon here on the left. These are all compositions, which can house individual files, sequences, audio or video, overdubs. So that would be the next piece down. And then from compositions, anything under that is just added to a composition. So again, we'd have our drive, our projects, our compositions, and then any files or sequences that fit into the composition. That's the general hierarchy at a 1,000-foot view.
Awesome. That's a great structure to kind of base a foundation for how we're going to be working in this project today. So, Marcello, one of the common questions that comes up is, once I'm in Descript, am I a basic member? Am I an editor? What's the difference between a basic member versus an editor in terms of how they can work in the app?
Yeah, really great question. So I, as the owner of this drive, I am by default an editor member. Like you said, we have our basic and our editor members. So now that I have this project, and now that I want to collaborate with other users, I can add either basic or editor members to this project or to my drive to edit this specific project or any other projects on my workspace. So the difference between the two, a basic member only has the ability to view and comment on the project, versus an editor, which can in full have the full capability of the owner of the project as well. So if I, as the owner, I can edit, I can export, I can publish, anything that I can do as the owner of the project, an editor member can do as well. But a basic member will only have comment and visual access either on the web or in the app. So if you have someone that is going to need to be your main editor or really going to be working with you throughout the project, they should be an editor, versus someone that might just be doing like a pass through and giving some notes on, hey, maybe cut this or cut this, but not actually editing anything, but just maybe leaving comments for what should be. That would be a basic member.
Awesome. That's a great breakdown. I think sometimes that's a common question, especially when a drive owner has multiple people, on their drive. They're like, who can do what? So yeah. That's a perfect breakdown. And for those of you that are just getting familiarized with Descript and trying to determine what plan you should sign up for, the good news is that basic members are free. So you can at least start putting people on, getting people onto your drive, start getting familiarized with the UI, and then you can decide, hey, do we need to bump them to an editor? And then you can make that decision later on.
Yeah, that's one important thing that I would just want to make sure that we highlight, is that these can be changed throughout your billing cycle. So hypothetically, if I have this project and I just want you, Harmony, to be added as a free member at the start, I can always upgrade you later on and give you edit access as time goes on. So that's something that can be managed. And like you're saying, add the whole team. You can upgrade them if you need it. If not, they're there, they have visibility. It's more info for everyone to share.
Awesome. And so a question we've had in the past, so you mentioned, Marcello, that basic members can comment. Can they highlight? That's a question that we've had in the past.
And that's a really great question. So no, a highlight would technically be an edit. So for someone to do a highlight or anything like that, you would need to be an editor on there. Now you can select a section of text and make a comment based on that section, similar to like a Word doc or something like that. But you're not actually like highlighting with the feature in the application. You're just making a comment on a selection. So if you're looking to highlight in Descript, you'd need to be an editor.
Awesome. Great tip. Cool. So let's jump back into Descript, into this project. So let's talk about the new project sidebar. What is this? Why did we do this? So for those of you that are seeing this new UI, we used to have a delineation between compositions and a media library. And now we have everything housed within this project sidebar. What's going on there, Marcello?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the left-hand side here, we'll see the project sidebar. It can be pinned or it can be moved out of sight. I can resize it here. But this, as you mentioned, does replace the composition and the media library views that old school Descript users may notice. After a lot of feedback of making that sidebar a little bit more palatable, we're lucky to end up with this project sidebar based on a lot of feedback. So we have the same elements that you would have had in the media library, in the composition view, and the search functionality is still here. We've just merged a little bit of that together to make it cleaner and to make organization a little bit more available for you. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a pretty solid folder structure, and there's a lot of default folders that are now on the project sidebar. So you'll notice project files, sequences, and any overdubs as well. So this was really meant to make everything all quick access, 1 or 2 click, easy to move, easy to grab. But that is the project sidebar at a very high view. But like I said, this has been a long time coming with all the feedback that we've been very thankful and happy to hear. So
awesome. And so I think a common question is now that we have everything in the project sidebar, let's say if you go into a sequence, there's a back button now instead of Xing out, right?
Yeah, great point. So for people that have been using Descript prior to our version, I think 16 is when we released this, you may have noticed that we've removed the X icon or disabled the ability to click escape and get out of the sequence. The reason that is because when we're looking at sequences here, we're looking at an element in the project sidebar. So what we want to do, instead of clicking an X or escape to get back into a composition, we can either select that composition from the sidebar, or like you mentioned, we introduced a back and a forward arrow up here on the top left, just similar to any traditional web browser, but I can hit back and get to my previous composition. Or if I want to go back into that sequence, I can hit forward and I'm back right where I was. Like I said, works super similar to like a web browser, and there's some hotkeys that you can see here if you just hover your mouse right above those arrows.
Love that. Thanks so much for covering that, Marcello. And I think now when you add a new composition, there's a couple new options now. You can add import from a link. Is that right, Marcello?
Yeah. When you create a composition here, you can click or copy paste in a link directly from like Zoom or Loom. You can select individual files, or you can click and drag in existing files or sequences from the project sidebar.
Awesome. So now that we're on the topic of pulling material into a Descript project or a composition, let's talk about like importing and transcribing. What can be imported, and what sort of transcription accuracy tips would you give us?
Yeah, absolutely. So what can be transcribed are audio and video files, pretty much anything with spoken word. We have a long list of acceptable file types, so feel free to drag in pretty much anything to your heart's extent. But yeah, what we can do is we can either click and drag or select to choose a file to bring in a new piece of media for us to transcribe. And there's 3 different types of transcription: automatic, which is just default Descript transcription. Then we have our white glove service, which allows for manual transcription through a transcript provider. And then we have an import transcription button. This is commonly used for people that are following a script and already have a dedicated script, so they don't need to use their transcription hours on something they've already had transcribed.
Nice. Is that okay? Can we pull something in just so that we can see what those options look like?
Yeah, so I'll click and drag here in just this test file I have. You'll notice that the icon on the screen just kind of split open, said, do you have audio or video? And once I've clicked and dragged that in, you'll see this has been entered into this composition that I dragged it in. And I just dragged in a WAV file from my desktop right into Descript, dropped it right into the composition. Once I've done that, you'll see it was added to my project files. So I'll have my newest one added down here. And then also I will have the ability to transcribe the file. So there was a little pop-up down here on the bottom left that I could click. There's also a transcribe file button here. And then once I click that, I'll see, like I mentioned, the three options here: import, white glove, or automatic. Once I've selected what type of transcription I prefer, I can click transcribe, and that'll begin that process. I can also here detect speakers. Hypothetically, there are multiple speakers on this track, myself and an interviewee, hypothetically. So I can always select multiple speakers, say that there's two, and then Descript will introduce a small prompt for me to listen back and select which speaker is which.
Awesome. So once we hit transcribe, so for folks that are not as familiar with our automatic transcription, what you'll get back is around 95% accuracy within a matter of moments. For those of you that choose white glove, that takes closer to a full business day to turn around. So then once you transcribe that via automatic transcription, you'll then get a script similar to what you're looking at here, and then you can start making edits, removing your ums and uhs, and all that good stuff. So Marcello, for folks that are asking for transcription accuracy tips, what would you say is the most important thing to consider when uploading audio or video?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that people need to be aware of is just the conditions that they are recording in, the quality of their audio/video, and how that directly relates to our ability to transcribe. I've had several people, submit files for transcription where they were walking down the street on a windy day in Chicago and picking up every other word and were confused why the transcript wasn't perfect. We do have a 95 to a 99% accuracy for our transcriptions, but that does come with the caveat of you have relatively clear audio. So keeping that in mind, where the quality of your content, how it's recorded in the platform that it's recorded, that is something to always keep in mind. We do have a pretty solid Help Center article that goes over some quick tips and tricks for creating a very nice recording environment. So I would encourage everybody to visit our Help Center at help.descript.com. Where you can chat in and say hey to our team. But that's a really great resource to find some general tips and tricks on positive recording environments.
Fantastic. So it's more about the audio quality than anything. Sometimes I know folks ask with accents, how does Descript handle accents? But I think the tip here is that it's actually more important to have superior audio quality than anything else.
Correct. And we do exclusively transcribe in English currently, in American English. So we do have some users with accents that occasionally will have a word or two that's out of place. My mother is Brazilian and her second language is English. So when she has used Descript, there's been a couple of times she's had to manually correct the transcription. But at the end of the day, the clearer her audio quality is, the better that transcript comes and the less she has to edit at the end of the day. So.
Awesome. Oh, we've got a question here from How Not to Sail. Any tips for avoiding transcript angriness when working with a sequence with video and multi-track audio if there's some bleed or ambient noise?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So also the How to Not Sail is How Not to Sail is a great podcast. So with a sequence, what we'd want to do for, like, let's say there's me and Harmony here talking back and forth. There's a little bit of mic bleed or there's some overlapping audio. In my sequence, it's super easy for me to use our Newell timeline toolbar. select my blade tool, and just start cutting and removing any overlapping audio or any room noise. That's something that we really, really encourage to just make sure there's no crosstalk or there's no overlapping audio. That's super common for people that, are maybe doing these more remote interviews, but might not have the best microphone configuration and their computer speakers are bleeding into their, microphone that they're recording on, and there's this overlap. So if at all possible, if there is overlap that can be controlled, we suggest just trimming that manually in the sequence editor. There's also, Descript will automatically notice some crosstalk and will point that out. But generally, we are looking to manually remove any crosstalk just to make sure when you're adding this sequence to a composition that the transcripts flow smoothly and there's not a lot of competing audio to take attention.
Nice. Thanks, Marcello. Very cool. So while we're on the topic of cleaning up our transcript, so now we've imported some material. We've talked a little bit about sequences and how to get our material organized. Now that we've got a composition, maybe let's talk a little bit about how to, now make some edits. How do we start removing our ums and uhs? How do we remove some word gaps? Maybe we want to toggle to correct text mode. Let's kind of unpack that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I can do is once I've gotten my transcription and once I've added that file to a composition, I can open that up and then begin any general text editing or any filler word removal, as you mentioned. So from this composition, across the top of the screen here, we'll see some extra features. I can click this wrench icon and do things like you mentioned, like remove filler words. This is a really, really solid feature. I am notorious for saying and ah and like accidentally and not even realizing until I see the transcript later on. So this is a really, really solid feature that from the left-hand side will point out what we recognize as filler words or any erroneously repeated words that we mark as filler words. I can very quickly select what words I want removed, and I can either delete them from the media or ignore them. And then I have the option as well to replace with a gap clip to make sure that timing is still retained. Because if I'm deleting a word, I'm shortening that audio. So if there's video that might get unaligned, replacing with gap clip is a good work there. Also, let's say that I've done my general removal of filler words or just, I've edited out weird, room noise and filler words. And now I actually want to get into correcting or removing text from the script. I can select a range of text. And right away, you'll notice at the bottom of the screen here, I'll have an option to either overdub or correct. I can select the hotkey for that or click here manually, but this will open up a correction window that will allow me to change this text here. So let's just say, I want to remove any of this text. I am just here removing text and not any audio. So with that correct text mode, I have changed the text, but not affected the audio. If I did want to affect the audio, I could, without entering the correction mode, make a selection in the script or in the timeline, click my delete key, and I've edited that out entirely rather than just isolating the text and editing that.
Nice. And then, so Marcello, I think you touched on something that's really important here. So you've highlighted the text, you've deleted it. It removes the underlying audio and or video. Can you also, once you highlight something, can you move it around within that composition?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say I just want to move this intro section of text. Maybe I want that at the very end and I want to say in closing or anything like that. I can very easily grab this section from the timeline and I can copy paste it and move it around, or I can use those same timeline toolbar tools that I was referring to earlier to make a cut and then now have this as an individual clip. And down here in the timeline, this represents all selected text in the text region here. So I can just select all of this, Now I have this as a clip, and I can click and drag this around or copy and paste it to other sections of my composition. So just as an example, I'm selecting copy, and I'm just going to drop it here at the very end of my composition, right? So I can paste that there, and abracadabra, I've moved that text, and I can either remove it from the front. Like I said, I can click and drag it if I don't want to have duplicate text anywhere. Some people have used this for like bumpers in the past, just to reintroduce their advertisement, say like, hey, once again, this episode is sponsored by whatever. But we do see some copy pasting or just some manual dragging around from the timeline or in the text region.
Awesome. And so now that you're working, you're going back and forth, working both in the script and in the timeline. Give us some tips on when to, either jump from the script or into the timeline. What are some tips for why and when I should work in the script versus the timeline?
Yeah. So for myself, and this comes down a little bit to personal preference and a little bit down to your workflow. But what I generally suggest is myself coming from classic DAWs and audio recording, the timeline, it just is familiar, right? Like that's something that most audio or video people have interacted with, is a timeline in some way, shape, or form. So the timeline can be used. I use it as like a visual indicator, as well as something that you can like further edit and remove things, like in bulk remove things, versus up here in the script view. This is pretty much strictly meant for editing your text and then for removing sections of text as well. Now you can do a lot of things in the script track, like add markers, change speaker labels. There's overdub that you can add in the script track as well that just can't be done in the timeline. So the timeline is a lot more so for like cutting, removing, or moving clips or adding new clips in the pin track or in the main timeline, versus the script track where you're getting that like full suite of editing when it comes to, like I said, removing filler words, changing speaker labels, and so on. But the script is where, like the script view is where you're really, really getting like the power of Descript. The timeline is a very solid visual aid and basic like editing piece for most like DAWs or NLEs coming over. So.
Nice. And then in the script area, that's also, for example, I'm in this project right now as well. So in the script, that's where you can utilize some of the collaboration features, right? The commenting and the highlighting and all of that. Yeah.
Correct. So like if you look at this top toolbar that I was referring to earlier, if let's say that you're the editor and I'm just, like reviewing, I can select this section of text. I can then either comment or use the keyboard shortcut for commenting. And this will open up the comment sidebar on the right-hand side of the script track. You'll see my initials or my user icon, and I can just @mention you and say like, hey, cut this.
Nice.
Awesome. You'll also notice that like there's an @mention feature here too. So you'll get an email notification about this. And then once you've completed that, you can mark it as archived or reply and say, actually, Marcello, we should keep this probably, or whatever it may be. But yeah.
Awesome. So the next thing I want to take a look at, and this is fairly broad, and we could probably do an entire hour just on editing in Descript. So maybe let's take a look at the composition that you had up earlier. Let's maybe talk about pin tracks, how to work in the inspector. What do you think? Maybe we can break that down.
Yeah, I have a pretty decent example here of a chock full pin track. But just to give a demonstration or just to kind of clarify, this timeline down here that you're seeing, like where you're seeing all this text, this is our main timeline. And then above that, we have our pinned track. The pin track is meant for any additional like audio or video that isn't specifically speech oriented. This could be like additional images. Let's say I have a video podcast and I want to add some images or some additional video or sound effects over me speaking. The pin track is where we're going to get all that added. So this again is not meant for like the main bulk of audio of me and you speaking. This is meant for a fun sound effect or a visual aid for our project. And that can be clicked and dragged onto the pin track, the same as a individual file can be dragged in to the timeline for transcription. You also mentioned the track inspector. So on the right-hand side here, you'll notice this tool, and I can collapse that by clicking this show or hide track inspector button on the right. But the track inspector is a tool that gives more information about what is selected or about the composition as a whole. So here, without any specific clip selected, you'll notice that I have listed my active tracks, what is or is not muted, and then at the very top, I can see my composition preferences, and I can edit those composition preferences here as well. But when I select a clip, whether it's in the main timeline or in the pin track, this will update to show me some new properties about that clip specifically. So I can see the name of the clip, I can change the volume or clip speed. That's a really cool new feature. And then I can also add effects like a compressor or an EQ, and then control some more track specific or clip specific options. And what you see listed on the track inspector will change depending on the type of file that you have. So here I have just a regular audio file, no video, but here I have a shape that I added as visual aid in my project. You'll notice here I have a completely different set of features. Same kind of thing goes with this pin. This is a video, so now I can change the position, I can change the opacity. So the track inspector is really where you're able to control the specifics of each individual clip in a composition versus the composition as a whole.
Nice. And then while we're looking at the timeline, maybe can you give us some tips for like adding crossfades or inserting silence? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. So if I go down here to the timeline, you'll notice as I hover my mouse above clip borders, you'll see this little white like caret or arrow icon appear. That is our fade. So if I just grab that and drag that, I'm now fading out this clip. I can fade in a clip. And if we have two audio clips back to back, I can crossfade by dragging into another clip. And then you'll see here, you'll see these kind of gray spaces in between each of my audio clips. These are silences that can be added or extended in your project. So let's say you'll see here that there's a couple spaces in between each of these audio clips. This is just giving me space, or the speaker space, so that I can lay out these images throughout the project. But adding spaces is easy as right-clicking and then selecting Insert Gap Clip. That will, at my playhead, insert a gap clip of, by default, 1 second. I can extend that or contract that by manually dragging my boundaries here, and you'll see right here the timing of it will update. I can control the duration here manually, or I can just click and drag to kind of align or fit with my my existing project.
Nice. And then while we're in this section talking about editing, there's two more topics I want to talk about before we move on to publishing and exporting. First is Overdub, and then I want to talk about the screen recorder.
Yeah.
So break down Overdub. Let's talk about what is Overdub, and then how it can be used, how you can use it to manipulate your voice, creating styles, and then we'll jump over to screen recorder.
Yeah, absolutely. So Overdub is a text-to-speech synthetic voice generator. So that can be used. We have some default stock voices that you can use, or you can create your own synthetic voice. But Overdub is a text-to-speech replacement tool for any spoken word. So let's say, in theory, right? We have Nancy here as the speaker. We see that we recorded this, but she misspoke, and this word is not correct. We need to replace this with like a different word entirely. I can remove this. I can click the D key for a keyboard shortcut for Overdub, and I can begin to type in here, and anything that I type will be generated. You'll even notice a generating Overdub feature down here. But once I've typed anything in this area, it then becomes synthetic speech or text-to-speech based off of the Overdub voice I've selected. And again, we have 7 stock voices that come default with every subscription type: free, creator, pro, enterprise, whatever. So you'll have access to 7 default stock voices, or with our pro or enterprise plans, you can also create a custom Overdub voice. So let's say that I'm going to be the primary speaker for these videos or episodes. I can record a set script. Based on that script, I can submit that script to Descript for generation of an overdub voice. Within 24 hours, I'm able to generate text based off my voice and the script that I read. So that allows for a lot of quick correction work, or instead of having to get back into a studio and re-record and meet these exact recording conditions, I can very easily remove an incorrect word and then type in a correction. It is one of my favorite features about Descript, like ever since I started. It's the craziest thing. But yeah, that's Overdub as a very, very high level text to speech. Yes.
Awesome. So Drew has a question here. Is there a way to pause overdub creation? It looks like it might be stressing you out a little bit when writing and pausing. So Marcello, any tips there?
Yeah, so Drew, it's nothing to stress about when you're seeing the overdub generation. Pretty much any time you do any change to an overdub section of text, it will regenerate. And that's just based off of what you are or are not changing about the section, right? So like if I even just add a period here and then say like, hey, this would begin to generate more overdub. It's regenerating this type here because I added a period to the end of that, and it is generating this new hey section. So you will see overdub generation throughout your editing. That is to be expected. There isn't a way to disable overdub generation because it continuously tries to make sure that it's generated in context, but there is no way to disable that. That's not a bad feature request, though, if that is bogging down your computer. So feel free to visit our feature request board as well and leave that as a request. But at this time, you cannot pause overdub generation. It will continue to generate as you edit and as you add more text.
Nice. Good question. And so, Marcello, in thinking about some of the inquiries you get in support, any other common gotchas with overdub when either creating a voice or trying to create styles?
I think the main thing is to just be super aware that you really do need to follow the script to a T. We have some people that just read the consent statement and then drag and drop in a video of like Trump or Biden speaking and hope that that will get their voice generated or something along those lines. But just being super aware, the same way that we were talking about recording conditions earlier and getting a good transcription, I think the most important thing to remember with overdub is when we generate overdub, we're doing it based on how and in what way you recorded that audio. So if you recorded in that windy city in Chicago on that windy day, like I was talking about earlier, your overdub generation is going to sound like that. So just being super aware that when you're recording your overdub voice, you want as best possible conditions as physically possible so that when you are splicing in this overdub, it generally matches your existing recording audio. So it can kind of sync up. We do have some tools for mixing and mastering per se. Like we have a compressor and an equalizer that, to an extent, in tandem with our fades and crossfades, can really get that all feeling like it was recorded in one space. But again, your core recordings should be in the best possible conditions that you can be in when recording overdub.
Nice. Excellent. And these are great questions, by the way. So everyone, please keep throwing your questions in the chat. And Jay on the back end will be popping these up on the screen. So keep them coming. So Marcello, the next thing, let's talk about Screen Recorder. How do I use it? How and what can I do with it?
Great question. So with the Screen Recorder, we actually just introduced the ability to start recording from the drive view. So I'll demonstrate that here. The Screen Recorder is a tool that Descript released, I think in our version, I want to say like 10. Either way, the Screen Recorder is a really, really great tool that can be used with Descript that either allows you to just record your face or your face alongside a screen. So we see a lot of people using this for internal tools. I use this religiously in customer support interactions when I want to say, hey, click here, but typing it out is not always super precise. What we can do is we can click new here, and then we'll see the option to select either my screen or my camera. So with the recording, I can click screen, and this will give me an option to record whatever is on my display. Or if I click camera, this will open up a self view of whatever webcam or whatever computer cameras I have by default. I can change that view as well in the toolbar for the screen recorder. When you download Descript, there's going to be an additional tool added to your, if you're on Mac, to the toolbar on the top right, and if you're on Windows, the toolbar on the bottom right. But that is where you'll be able to control your screen recording preferences. And then, like I said, you can initiate a screen recording from that tool in the toolbar or from the drive view here.
Nice. What do you say? Let's can we show an example? Just like, let's do a quick screen recording, and we can show a quick demo.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see if I can do that here real quick.
Awesome.
So, and the cool thing with the screen recorder is that you also have the ability to automatically get a transcription out of this. So I'm just going to do like a basic screen recording of my screen here. I'm talking, we're having a good time, and now my screen is recorded. When I hit stop, I'll be able to open this project in Descript. And now under my screen recordings, I should have one populating here in a moment. I just did a screen recording, but I'm not sure if it came through on the screen share here. But yeah, once we have a screen recording completed, it would then populate under our screen recordings in my workspace. Once you complete a screen recording as well, there's a micro editor called the Quick Editor that opens up to allow you to do some very basic edits before publish, or allows you to expand that project in Descript for more editing.
Nice. So we've got a couple of questions here. Maybe we could jump back into the tutorial real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
So SaaSmaster has a question. Is there a way to blur part of the screen in the editor? So if you want to, blur out a portion of the screen, is that possible?
We don't have a traditional like blur or pixelate tool, but we do have images that you could add. So I've seen some people in the past insert like a rectangle and just kind of put a black square over private information. There's not, like I said, there's not like a traditional like pixelate or blur tool like you might see in some other photo editors like I've seen in the past. But yeah, for what I've seen workaround wise in the app, I've seen a lot of people use the rectangle tool or any of those one-off images to just overlay on top of any private or not needed to see information.
Nice. Yeah, great question. And then going back to Overdub real quick, any tips for using inflections when recording the master overdub?
I don't think that I have any specific tips aside the fact that when you are creating the master overdub, keep in mind that you can create different voice styles based on that overdub. So it might be useful to be kind of conscious of your inflection when reading that script, because it's not required to read it in a specific way just by default. But if you yourself would like to have multiple styles of voice, you can select different parts of your recording and create a style based off that. So in my personal overdub recording, I have a spot where I'm talking a little bit quicker or talking a little bit more like louder or more passionate, let's say, and I can create overdub voice styles based on that allow me to kind of pull from that reading inflection that I had in that section of the script and then use that as the basis of an overdub generation. So again, we don't require you to read it in any specific inflection, but that might be something to keep in mind if you're planning on using multiple styles.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great tip. I think, and Rick has a question too. So if you don't like your overdub voice, can you re-record it?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a really great question. We have a lot of people that are like, I didn't like the first go, or, I bought a better microphone. Like, can I do it over? Yes, you're more than welcome to jump back into your recording project. And then from there, you can delete and re-record. You can record a second take just in case you want to keep the first. But you are more than welcome to re-record your training audio as long as it contains the consent statement and is following the script to the T. You can record that in any other condition, resubmit that, and we'll generate a new version of your overdub voice.
Nice. Yeah, great question, Rick. And for and we'll get to Elliot's question in just a second. So for those of you that might not have set up your Overdub voice, you do need a pro subscription in order to use Overdub. And I think, Marcello, you can create up to 3 voices. Is that right?
Correct. So, and this is specifically for custom overdub voice generation. So if I want my voice or your voice or a specific speaker, I will need a pro account. And each pro account can have a maximum of 3 overdub voices. That is at cost. So that's not by default. By default, each account is getting 1 overdub voice, and you can add multiple members to get that to get up to that 3 cap. But correct, pro accounts are capped at 3. More than that, they would need to contact our enterprise team for a larger breadth of overdub voices. But again, if you don't have a pro account, if you're on our free or creator plan or the pro or enterprise, you still have access to those 7 overdub voices that are stock, and they have a couple of individual voice styles as well that you can use.
Right. And then one more question from Mikhail with relation to overdub. Great question. Am I allowed to build in voices commercially to create videos with these voices?
That is a really, really great question that we get asked all the time. And as it stands today, yes, you are able to use Overdub, the stock voices or your voice in commercial projects. Our terms and conditions page gives a little bit more specific information on that if you're curious. But as it stands today, yes, you are able to use them in commercial projects.
Nice. Great questions. All right. Another overdub. Overdub's not a popular topic today. How is the overdub data stored?
Yeah, so the overdub data is stored similar to another project on your account. It's going to be stored under the overdub tab on your main drive view. And we use AWS as a storage facility. So if data security is the concern, that would be there. But yeah, overdub data is stored private and protected in your account under your overdub training data, and is only used by yourself or anybody that you give access to the voice. And again, we have very, very solid security standards in terms of people being concerned that let's say their voice will leak, or like they have a consent statement just floating around somewhere. But that's nothing to be concerned about. If you do have any specific security concerns, feel free to reach out to our support team. I'm happy to address anything specifically.
Nice. And then going back to SaaSmaster, another question. So is there a way to add your personal vocabulary words for transcription? This is a great question. We have a tool just for this, our Transcription Glossary. Marcello, do you want to show us how to customize some terms here?
Yeah, absolutely. So like Harmony said, we're looking at the Transcription Glossary. To access that, I'm going to go to the top left of the Descript window, click the little arrow just to the right of the D icon, and then I can click from that menu, Transcription Glossary. This will allow me to add specific words that Descript sometimes has a hard time transcribing. My name is Marcello. I will never in my life get the correct transcription out of Descript unless I put my name manually in here. So this is a really, really great area for things like Zapier. Webhook might be grabbed, but might be 2 separate words. SaaSmaster might not be grabbed. So this would be a really great place to enter any company specific jargon or anything specific that you have for your transcription needs.
Nice. Awesome. Thanks, Marcello. So I'd love to go back to Elliot's question around exporting, because that'll bring us to our last theme around how to export and publish content. So can you go through exporting to Audition and keeping all of the overdub lines on one track?
Yeah, absolutely. So what this user is referring to is one of our timeline export features. What I can do is once I'm done with my project and I'm ready to export it, I can click Share on the top right, and then I can click Export, and this brings me to my export options. The one that this user is referring to specifically is our Audition timeline export down here. Some users like to take their Descript project and then continue editing it in a different Pro app, like another NLE or a DAW. You'll see options for Final Cut, Premiere, Logic, and so on here. But for Audition, we can click Audition, and then here is our export options. If you're wanting to keep everything, all overdub specifically on one track, there's not a specific feature for that. You can either create a track for each individual file or not. So there's not an export setting specifically for overdub in that regard, but that is another really great feature request if you're looking to have that isolated. The good thing is that you are still creating a track for each individual file. So you could, in your external editor in Audition, you could always manually reattach those. That would be my closest workaround for there. But like I mentioned, you can either all or nothing create a track for each file or not. But like I said, another great feature request that I'd love to see put on that board. So.
Nice. And then Marcello, if we go back to the main export page, let's maybe talk through some of these options here. So how can I best utilize, cloud exports, file exports, and timeline exports? Maybe we can break this down a little bit.
Yeah, let me get to a video project so we have some more options here. And you'll notice the export options do update depending on what content you have in your project. So the first composition I had only had audio, so I wasn't able to see YouTube or video or GIF as an option. Now that I'm in a video project, I have the ability to export to video, GIF, YouTube, or any of our additional cloud export partners. But in this section is where I'm able to select either, hey, I'm exporting to a page, like I'm publishing my own project out there for the world to see with a custom-made web.descript.com website. Here I can export to audiograms, which is another similar publish page. I see a lot of people use this for just like talking head or just like Instagram TV type of advertisements. But here you'll see like more options for cloud exports. These are going to either social medias or published directly to a Descript page. Then we'll see our file export options. These are just to have a download locally of either my text, so I can get a completed Word doc or RTF, sorry. I can also export subtitles specifically. I can export audio in a couple different formats. I can export video with some specific settings. And then my favorite, you got a GIF export or GIF, whatever your flavor is. But you also have the option to export a specific composition, current selection. So if I've selected a section of text that I want to like publish as an audiogram, any markers, line breaks, or I can just say, give me it all, and I can export all compositions.
Awesome. So Marcello, what are some of the common questions that you get from users when they're trying to export? Any tips you can give us there?
Yeah, absolutely. So right off the bat, the one that I get the most commonly asked is, do I have to download an audiogram from the published page that is created? So if I create an audiogram, here I'm seeing a button that says publish, not export. So even though I'm clicking publish, I am also getting a local copy of this video on my hard drive. A super common question that people, and we're updating the wording here to kind of clarify that, but a super common question I get asked is, hey, I clicked publish, my audiogram is online. Do I have to download it from there, or is there a button that I missed? But by clicking this, you are automatically getting a export of this audiogram downloaded locally to your should be downloads folder or wherever you've delineated your downloads to go. That's a super, super common question that I get asked. And another one would just be, hey, what do I do with these audio settings? Like, what's normalization? What is sample rate? How do I know if I should have one or two channels? What's the difference between an MP3 and a WAV? We have some pretty solid information on some of this on our Help Center. Again, I'd suggest you strongly to visiting there. And if you have any specific questions or you want to just run by us what might be best for your project, you're more than welcome to reach out to us via the live chat in the application or via our support board at help.descript.com. So it's a really common questions of like, what does this mean? What do I do with this? Like I said, the Help Center has some info, but if you have any specific questions, we're happy to help.
Awesome. And then in terms of like, if you are now just getting started with Descript and you're trying to integrate it into your workflow, as far as exporting into timelines, is there anything you might tell us, Marcello, as far as like proxy support or any tips you might have with respect to doing timeline exports?
Yeah, I would just say for most users that are doing timeline exports, I've seen most commonly people going to like Final Cut, Audition, or a Logic or Pro Tools scenario. So just being super conscious of what settings you're selecting and what platform you're going to. And if you are already working on a project, like if you've gone from Final Cut to Descript back to Final Cut, just being aware that when you're exporting, you might not want to include media files in the export because those files already exist and you don't want to double up on projects. So just being conscious of your workflow and your export settings would be super huge. Like to your point, since we do not support proxies to an extent, like I would not want to keep this setting enabled when I am going from a video editor to Descript back to that video editor. So just again, keeping in mind the workflow and where Descript fits into that workflow, and then just being conscious of your export settings throughout that.
Awesome. And Marcello, so you mentioned a few times that folks can chat with the team. Can you show us where and how in the app folks can do that?
Absolutely. So if you go right down here to the bottom right corner to the Learning Center, you'll see a little pop out. But right here on the bottom right, you'll see an option to chat with us. This will open a module in Descript that will allow you to chat live with any of our support agents. So if you've chatted in, you might have seen me in there. Hello. But that is how you gain access to chat. You can also do that from help.descript.com or in the web version of the app. But you can see here, I can just type in a question and it would prompt me back with, let's just type in Overdub. It's going to suggest to me a couple of Help Center articles that might be helpful. And then if I want to chat with an individual, I can click Get in Touch, and it will give me an option to create an email ticket or a live chat ticket.
Fantastic. And the other thing I noticed now when folks are clicking on the question icon, we do have a new Learning Center here. So if you're looking for targeted training material, you can click on one of these categories and it'll take you through training material right in the app.
There's a pretty in-depth overdub section too. So for everyone that was having overdub questions, visit the overdub voice cloning section of the video tutorials.
Fantastic. I see another question from Rick. We've got a few minutes left. So any last questions, throw them in the chat and we'll fire away. So where can I find tips and documentation about writing phonetic text when I'm trying to fix pronunciation of words?
Yeah, if this is related to overdub, then there is a Help Center article that we have that just kind of goes over playing with punctuation and with phonetic spelling to get things sounding the way that you would like. If there are specific words that overdub is not pronouncing correctly, please notify us so that we can bring that to our team. But we do have an article at help.descript.com that kind of outlines some troubleshooting with phonetic spelling or with inflection for overdub voices. So I would encourage checking that out. But that is something where we would just suggest to type it out as you would say it if overdub is having a problem pronouncing something specific.
Awesome. And I see another one from SassMaster. This is a great question. So can I edit the transcription without affecting the timing? Can you upload a transcript to YouTube and not have a timing issue?
Yeah. So you're super able to edit your time or your transcript and just the script without affecting any of the timing of the media. When I was referring earlier to entering like a correct text mode, that's more so what I was saying is we can just toggle correct text, and I am now adding or removing text without affecting the timing of the source audio or video. That will allow me then to either export like a just SRT file and then import that and not really hurt timing because that has specific timestamps on it. Or if you have, let's say, like I add a word in here and it's realigning, but it's pushing these other words to the side and I want to retain timing there. I can manually adjust my word boundaries, which can be done here in the timeline. So you see the word "this" was kind of scooted forward and now the timing would be out of sync technically. I can hold down the command key and you'll see here, hold command to correct alignment. I can change that and correct the timing or fix timing if anything goes off throughout my editing. But mostly correcting or editing in the correct text mode should retain timing of the video.
Fantastic. Great. Well, we're at the 10 a.m. Pacific time mark. So I want to thank everyone so much for joining us today. Wonderful questions. Please join us next week. We're going to be doing a video editing session. Join our Descript Discord community. The link is there on the screen. As Marcello mentioned, go to help.descript.com, chat with us. We'd love to hear from you. And Marcello, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you again so much for having me.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Have a great one, everybody.
Bye.